This week, not all our heroes will be marching down the Rajpath. So, we go where they are. Heartfelt conversations and inside track with the men behind the machines. With the defenders of India. These waters that envelop India from three sides reflect a strange trait. When relatively, they've been the superhighways to a thriving exchange of culture and ideas. But when looked away from, they've brought misery. Today, these waters represent a tempting opportunity to shape the narrative in the Indian Ocean region, through which pass over 1 lakh ships annually, carrying 2/3 of the world's oil, 1/3 of the world's cargo, and the highest volume of goods from among all regions across the globe. In India's context, these waters are the carriers of over 90% of India's trade, source of over 50% of our energy, and directly impact the livelihood of millions of our fishermen. Yet there have been times we've chosen to look away and pay the price. The picture actually is much bigger than merely securing India's 7,500-kilometer long coastline. At stake is the ability to influence outcomes in a zone adding up to nearly 4.6 million square kilometer, a region bigger than the country's total landmass. At this point, India is looking to put behind the impact of an inward-looking establishment and look ahead. What it translates to on the ground is something we decided to witness for ourselves. Such has been the turbulence in the waters around the Indian coastline that the Indian Navy, a blue water force mandated to wage war, has also been forced to look at an additional role. This role involves not mighty loaded ships with missiles and ammunition, but smaller, stealthier, faster crafts like the one on which I am, like the one that you see behind me. These crafts have a role to do, and so do the men who man, and we will tell you about a role about which very little is known. Our journey was conducted on board naval vessel T-15, commandeered by Lieutenant Commander Nikhil Lad. A recent induction into the sea-going force, this vessel is a twin-engine waterjet propulsion craft which lists speed as its biggest utility.
So there is a threat received just now. All positions, close up on their action course and they're closing up about to break. Hands to action station, hands to action station, hands to action station.
Our first step was the Neelam processing plant, a deep-sea property of India's largest crude oil and natural gas maker, the ONGC. Located 75 kilometers west of Mumbai in the vastness of the Arabian Sea, it is places like Neelam that ships like T-15 seek to protect. When we refer to threat, it isn't just about a repeat of 1993 blasts or the 26/11 incident in 2008. India actually has a lot to protect, even far away from the land at sea, like the one that you see behind me. This is the Neelam processing plant. It is among the biggest plants which are located in proximity to Mumbai on India's western seaboard, and securing them, those men who are inside, and the entire region, which has several manned and unmanned oil wells, is as important a task.
7504 sir.
Build up 800.
800, sir.
For all its effort, the T-15 is merely the proverbial brick in the wall. And quite clearly, India has a much larger picture to look at. Back at the Western Naval Command headquarters, Rear Admiral Deepak Bali has his task cut out. Heading the Offshore Defence Advisory Group, or the ODAG, his team of 8 officers and 80 sailors is responsible for the security of platforms like Neelam. In a quick conversation, he lays open the big picture.
As on date, we have almost 16 manned process platforms on both the coast. Apart from these, there are about 242 unmanned platforms and about 16 single point moorings and 46 rigs which are currently employed in the exploration and the processing business. And to support all these manned platforms, unmanned platforms and the rigs, you have about 213 offshore support vessels of various kinds. Roughly about 50% of the total oil that is produced in India and about 75% of the gas is produced in the offshore arena. Now you have the oil and gas producing areas both on the east as well as the west coast. There was some study which was carried out in 2014-15, and that time it was thought that the replacement price of the assets in the ODA would be to the tune of about 300,000 crores.
Given how high the stakes are, every individual, whether Indian or not, wanting to access an offshore platform will have his records and equipment scrutinized by Admiral Bali's team. It is, after all, not without reason that not a single incident of sabotage has occurred in a region otherwise frequently exploited by terrorists.
We have a system of naval security clearance for all vessels which are deployed in support of the offshore activities. So once they get the requisite clearances from all the government departments, we send teams to do physical inspection on boats to see whether what they are saying is correct. And thereafter these vessels are given the naval security clearance. So we track all these people on the radars.
At the high seas, the deployment for the crew of Tango 15 can stretch at times to nearly a week, sometimes even more. Space constraints and the need for speed implies the ship has to remain light, which in this context means sailing without food. Life at sea is hardly easy, and one such demonstration of just what it takes is right there in front of your eyes. What's happening out there is that this is an immediate support vessel of the Indian Navy, which is tasked with securing this entire area, including, of course, this particular oil processing platform. Now, as do men and as do most armies, they can never march on an empty stomach, and that's precisely the solution out there. The Indian Navy is in tie-up with the ONGC, and whenever it is in these areas, and because these boats, these ships, mind you, are smaller, lighter ones, they do not have space to carry elaborate meals. This is how they actually do it. That's the ONGC platform. This vessel, which was coming in proximity and had a requirement of food, informed them on radio, prepared the food, and as you can see, that's the crew of the ship which is going there, and that's the food for the crew which is now being collected right in front of your eyes. There are ways and means which are, in a sense, brought out, and they're done so as to ensure that you are sustaining yourself and you're able to focus on the job, which is primarily the reason why you're here and why your ship is here. The efforts of the men on board Tango 15 are aided by their brothers from the Indian Coast Guard. Though younger and smaller in comparison to the Navy, the Coast Guard, whose mandate is akin to policing the seas, has cast its own net over India's maritime territory. This service, which has seen a steady induction of platforms, especially in the aftermath of the 26/11 terrorist strikes, has rapidly risen to a force with 126 ships, 62 aircraft and an overall personnel strength of over 10,000. In conjunction with the Navy, the Coast Guard is ever at work to intensify the density of the surveillance grid over India's vulnerable waters. Despite the best of efforts of both these services and a much needed push by the government, India's waters remain vulnerable. And this is on account of the unregulated nature of maritime traffic and the ability of the terrorists to exploit the same. Using satellite data and traffic monitoring systems, Coast Guard's Maritime Rescue Coordination Center in Mumbai at any given point in time is tracking over 2 lakh fishing boats, over 3,500 merchant vessels and 200 aircraft traversing over an expanse of 2.6 million square kilometers along India's western seaboard. This setup is mandated to coordinate rescue at sea should the need arise. Sharing a wall with the MRCC is the Coast Guard's Regional Operating Centre.
Confirm next port of call or
using data from 46 radars mounted on lighthouses along India's western coast, which can observe up to 50 kilometers into the sea, this team is nearly obsessed with maintaining decorum at sea. When they don't like something, they intervene.
Sir, one merchant vessel, Ocean Mermaid.
Okay.
The ETA was on 16th, sir.
Okay.
It is drifting out of Mumbai, sir.
Have you called it?
Yeah, I called him, but not replying till now, sir.
Okay. Pan check here.
We got pan, sir.
Do one thing. First you call twice. Tell ROS Mumbai also to keep watch.
Okay.
And make one note to Ops Room and MRCC.
Ships require a certain amount of depth in the water to enter and operate. The aircraft, for that matter, is not restricted in any way by the presence or the absence of any depth. And that's the reason why it has been positioned in Mumbai recently. We're on board an Indian Coast Guard aircraft, and on our left is a Coast Guard interceptor boat. Now, these may appear small to you in size, but they are the workhorses of the Indian Coast Guard. To police an area as vast as 2.6 million square kilometers, that's the area only on India's western seaboard, you need long legs as well, and that's where ships like the Coast Guard ship Sankalp comes into the picture. As the man at the helm of the security edifice, Rear Admiral Sanjay Mahindru is aware that the perfect structure may never be built, and yet his men cannot stop from making the effort.
Coastal security, unlike possibly land security, can never be 100%. You cannot cover every meter of the sea. The sea is much larger, the coast is much larger. So there is a sense of porosity to coastal security, which we are trying to plug in every way. So the porosity and the length of the sea coast is something that we are trying to overcome. Communications is another thing. Sea becomes rough very easily. So communications generally become a problem for us. And interoperability, like I told you, when 4-5 agencies start working together in looking towards a common enemy or a common area, then we should be totally interoperable. So these are the challenges that we keep facing. All of us have got a common operating picture, and that is a big step ahead. So now that if there is a threat emanating, we know where the threat is, we know who's the first responder, we know how we are going to attack it.
Back on Tango 15, the crew gears up for night patrol. Though officially the crew is to operate in shifts of up to 2 hours followed by rest of equal duration, after which they again report to duty, in reality they are simply a call away. A navy with the ambition of operating at least 3 massive aircraft carrier ships at any given point in time is imparting some valuable lessons to its young officers and men on much smaller ships like this one.
So it's always a comparison between what you see outside and what you're seeing on your radar.
So it's a mix and match of both.
It's a mix and match of both.
It complements in a way to each other.
And navigation per se is generally eyeball navigation, and you cannot have more faith on a machine which is built by a man as compared to what is your brain speaking about, talking to you. It's a brain which is talking to you. So it's more challenging here. Of course, on bigger ships it's easier because it's a group work, it's a teamwork, but here it is just one man show. It's kind of, there's no one whom you can, fall back on. So basic job is you get information about some threat. You're supposed to go as fast as possible, reach the place of action as fast as possible, interdict, investigate, and then the whole command, the Western Naval Command, is there backing you because the entire force is sitting behind you.
Unlike a warship where there are hundreds of sailors, there are officers, there are several departments on board an ISV, there's a completely different setup. It's a compact crew. Every specialist is also a generalist, everyone doubling up for the other. So just what makes the crew on board an ISV click? Let's find out. Leading seaman Rathi, whose first name is Sagar and hails from Uttar Pradesh, had an interesting analogy to share.
हम लोग यहाँ वो सबमरीन कल्चर फॉलो करते हैं और ऐसा नहीं है कि जैसे मैं सीमेंट साइड से हूँ तो मुझे इलेक्ट्रिकल या इंजीनियरिंग साइड का नॉलेज होना चाहिए, मुझे उसका भी नॉलेज होना चाहिए। दूसरे मेरे सबऑर्डिनेट्स हैं, वो लोग भी जो मैं ड्यूटीज़ फुलफिल करता हूँ वो लोग भी सेम ड्यूटीज़ कैरी आउट कर सकते हैं। जो ब्लैक गोल्ड है, मतलब जो हमारा क्रूड ऑयल जो आता है, हम उसकी बेसिकली सेफ्टी के लिए हैं। जो हमारे देश की क्या बोलते हैं नवरत्न जो है, हम उसकी मतलब रक्षा के लिए हैं।
Son of an army man, Chief Engine Room Artificer Murli Krishna has served on board a variety of naval ships in his 13-year-long career. Never before has he been deployed on a ship like Tango 15.
Just like patrolling, मतलब पेट्रोलिंग होता है ना कि जस्ट गश्ती लगाते हैं, जस्ट टू समथिंग टू प्रिवेंट, मतलब इनिशियल प्रिवेंट हम ही करते हैं कि ताकि कोई भी अटैक होने के जस्ट बड़ा नहीं आता, मतलब पूरा एक अटैक नहीं होगा। पहले कोई आएगा छोटे, मतलब जेमनी में लेके छोटे छोटे बोट्स में आ सकते हैं, तो उनको हम प्रिवेंट करेंगे। तो मतलब इनिशियल अटैक प्रिवेंट हो जाएगा तो बड़ा अटैक ऑटोमेटिकली प्रिवेंट हो सकता है।
Leading seaman KD Vishwakarma is a navigator and we let him navigate us to the last word.
पहली फीलिंग ये आई कि ओपनली है, खुला हुआ है, सब कुछ अच्छा है। बड़े शिप में क्या होता है, हम प्रॉपर चैनल होता है, उसके अनुसार स्टेप बाय स्टेप होता है, वो फॉलो यहाँ भी होता है, बट यहाँ पे क्या होता है हम सबसे शेयर करते हैं एक फैमिली की तरह। चेन छोटा है तो वो दैट इज गुड, ये अच्छा लगता है। कि जो चाहता था कि सबसे पहले तो इंस्पायर हुआ कि वाइट ड्रेस दिखने भी अच्छे है, तो वो पहने का वो मन था। कोई सिविल लाइफ वाला कोई कोर्स करके जो करते हैं कि हाँ मुझे एयरपोर्ट में ही देखना है, अलग अलग कोर्स करके पैसे देके सीखने वाला, वो सब नहीं मिल सकता। उसको कहीं पे नेवी में आपको सब कुछ मिल सकता है। सी लाइफ, आपकी एयर लाइफ एंड आपकी स्पेस लाइफ, हर चीज़ है। और ऐसे ऐसे अचीवमेंट और मूवमेंट हर चीज़ से होते हैं कि अब बहुत सबसे डिफरेंट है।
Again, and the end of a working day will be only met by the start of another. India today spent a full good day with the crew and this particular ship that you're watching, and as we leave, this ship and its crew will continue doing its task, securing India's interests in the Arabian Sea. We only hope that you met and you learned something new about the defenders of India.